Hey everybody, welcome to Hands on Books. If this is your first time here, this is a show where we just open books. I've got a pile of mostly used ones here that I'll pick from at random, and I'm just going to get started. Some Christmas presents to myself. All right, this is Militia Christi, the Christian Religion and the Military in the First 3 Centuries by Adolf Harnack. Adolf Harnack, 1851 to 1930, was a professor in the University of Berlin, director of the Prussian Staatsbibliothek, and president of the Kaiser Wilhelm Gesellschaft for Furthering Scholarship in Science, now the Max Planck Institute. His history of dogma is renowned. And I'm not sure what MCI means, but David Gracie is Protestant chaplain and executive director of the Center for Ethics and Social Policy at Temple University in Philadelphia. And yeah, I came across Adolf Harnack looking at this book on Marcion that he wrote. But yeah, I've also looked at buying his History of Dogma because it seems like a really cool set to have. So about this book, careful scholarship and insightful commentary characterize this seminal treatment of the teachings of the Church Fathers concerning the military question. The first English translation of the now classic work includes an introduction which reviews the research since Harnack. The first chapter deals with the use of military terms and images in the New Testament and early Christian writings, and the effects this usage had on the behavior and attitudes of the Church. For example, the issue of holy war. The second chapter reviews the sources to determine to what extent early Christians participated in the military and what judgments the Church made on participations in warfare. The work also suggests how the apocalyptic mentality may have helped to legitimate the participation in military activities and provides insight into how the early Church came to terms with the problem of continuing life in the world. Oh, McInnes is what MCI stands for. I thought it was some sort of like church title. From the translator's introduction, Adolf von Harnack wrote Militia Christi in 1905. It has never been translated into English. One wonders why not. It is an important monograph, referred to repeatedly in every subsequent study of the military question in the early Church, and it was written by one of the great modern doctors of the Church. Perhaps it is because Harnack's position on the question was presented in the mission and expansion of Christianity in the first 3 centuries, which he wrote in 1902 and which was translated as early as 1904. But surely it is of value to have the more detailed discussion and the commentary on the sources which are assembled in Militia Christi. Perhaps the reason is that an English scholar, C. John Cadeau, did Harnack's work over again and then some in his book, The Early Christian Attitude to War, from 1919. Cadeau was a pacifist who felt the need to present the witness of the early church against war after the Great War had been fought. W. E. Orchard, in his foreword to Cadeau's book, noted that Militia Christi had not yet been translated, but said that he felt the present work would fill its place. Cadeau himself wrote of Militia Christi. It is without doubt the most thorough and scholarly work on the subject that has yet been produced. All right, let's go ahead and read the beginning. From the preface. The problems examined in both of the following essays were briefly discussed in my work entitled The Mission and Expansion of Christianity in the First 3 Centuries. They appeared to me even then to deserve a more thorough treatment, but I could not provide it within the limits of the history of mission. Here it is accomplished. I have confined myself strictly to the theme, since I am not in a position to bring something new to the more general questions, like religion in the Roman army, or the judgment on war and the warrior caste in the works of Greek and Roman philosophers. And I do not simply want to repeat what is known. But one must always keep the background in view if one undertakes to evaluate the special problem of the relationship of the church to the military. Tertullian wrote, quote, "The religion of the Romans is totally of the camp. It worships the standards, signa. It swears by the standards. It elevates the standards above all the gods." End quote. But neither should the disparaging judgments of the philosophers concerning military service be forgotten. For Christianity was not only reckoned as philosophy, but chose to be related to philosophy and was influenced by it. In the relationship of early Christianity to war and to the army, one will be amazed once more by the Church's unparalleled elasticity and universalism. The Church upheld the highest ideals but still established itself in the world. It understood how to derive a conservative motive for worldly living from a future hope which was quite world-forsaking. And it proved here once again that it was able to endure antagonistic forces even while it encircled them. It was already a world church while it still stood defenseless against the world. The special justification for developing this theme of the relationship of the Christian religion to the army in a monograph lies in the facts that the early Christians, especially in the West, perceived themselves as God's soldiers, and that the historical shift from paganism to Christianity first took place publicly in the army. All right, let's skip ahead to part 1. A little overview of the chapter here. The Christian religion and the military. This title encompasses 3 problems. 1. Has the Christian religion continuously or at any time in its history assumed a warlike character and preached the right and duty of the holy war? 2. Has the Church, occasionally or continuously, adopted military organization in a transferred sense and disciplined its believers, or a part of them, as soldiers of Christ? 3. What position has the Church taken with regard to the secular military profession and to war? Has it regarded them as valid or tolerated them, or has it condemned them? These are 3 different questions, but they stand in a close relationship to each other. They will be answered in the following work with respect to the first 3 centuries of Christianity. The first and second questions are treated together in one investigation. The third is handled separately. Whoever wishes to take these questions through the following centuries to the present day may also count upon interesting insights and worthwhile findings. What is discussed here is only intended to lay the groundwork. A.H. Part 1. The Christian as Soldier. Militia Christi, Militia Dei Vivi. Army of Christ, Army of the Living God. The view which undergirds these concepts apparently could only have very limited range in the early Christian religion. Sayings of Jesus point in a quite different direction, and the nature of the gospel itself, as it must have been understood by the first generations, appears to be opposed to everything warlike. Patience, meekness, readiness for service, renunciations of one's own right. These are the virtues which ought to distinguish the Christian. Even self-defense was not recognized. Those who endure injustice are called blessed. The meek are promised the inheritance of the earthly realm. Peace is proclaimed to all people, and the gospel itself is called the gospel of peace. The disciples of Jesus are not to behave the way the mighty and powerful do. Their attitude is supposed to be opposite to the attitude of the ones who rule. We need say nothing more to confirm that the gospel excluded all force and had nothing warlike about it, nor would it endure the same. How apparently unnecessary it was to speak the words of Matthew 26:52, although it certainly was necessary. Quote, "Put up your sword, for he who takes the sword will perish by the sword." End quote. And to this is connected the message that the Father in heaven does not want to carry out his work on earth by means of legions of warrior angels. See also John 18:36. Yet war is one of the basic forms of all life, and there are inalienable virtues which find their highest expression, at least symbolically, in the warrior's calling: obedience and courage, loyalty unto death, self-abnegation and strength, virtus. No higher religion can do without the images which are taken from war, and on this account it cannot dispense with warriors. Whether a religion allows itself to be determined by these necessities, by becoming engaged more and more in the military and its forms, is a question the answer to which always reveals an important part of the history of religion. The fact that our study of the history of Christianity has until now gone into this dimension so little is only a proof that we have still not completely surveyed the aspects under which religion is to be considered. Yeah, it's always been an interesting part of history to me, that transition, or that transitional period between the early Jesus movement and when it becomes a state religion under Constantine. So you have this upending of what its original values would be with regard to pacifism and nonviolence, where the church has become an essential part of the Roman state, the preferred religion of the empire. So in becoming that, it forces the church to be making decisions that would have seemed to have gone against its original nonviolence. I think there's a lot of interesting stuff there. So this looks like a cool book, perfect condition. Let's go ahead and pick another one. Trying to pick one that you can kind of tell by the packaging that it's probably a nicer book, because it's Christmas. All right. Gateless Gate. Newly translated with commentary by Zen master Koun Yamada. You will feel as though the whole universe has totally collapsed. Strange as it may seem, this experience has the power to free you from the agonies of the world. The joy and happiness at that time are beyond all words, and there are no philosophies or theories attached to it. This is the enlightenment, the satori of Zen. Countless men and women have experienced the satori of Zen by passing through the gateless gate of the Mumonkan, 48 koans collected by Master Mumon in the 13th century. Koun Yamada Roshi's translation is meticulous and highly readable. It is enriched by scholarly supplements, but more importantly, by the commentaries of this living Zen master. I guess this is Yamada. (1979). From the foreword. In order to appreciate the unique character of Yamada Roshi's translation of the Gateless Gate and his Teisho, we need to understand two basic instructional tools used in traditional Zen training. The first of these is the koan, which is much more than a paradoxical riddle designed to prod the mind into intuitive insight. The koan is quite literally a touchstone of reality. It records an instance in which a key issue of practice and realization is presented and examined by experience rather than by discursive or linear logic. It serves as a kind of precedent, like a classic legal decision. Just as a legal precedent is cited to guide one in clarifying the law, so the koan, literally public case, establishes a baseline of insight to help us penetrate more deeply into the significance of life and death in order to diagnose our blind spots and remove obstructions to our vision. To the student of Zen, the koan offers an opportunity to measure one's understanding against that of the ancient master whose understanding of a given point is embodied in the case. By entering into the spirit of a given koan, which is usually a dialogue or saying from Zen history or from the sutras, the Zen student is obliged to shed his limited perspectives and to see through the eyes of the Buddhas and the patriarchs. Doing this systematically year after year under their close guidance of a qualified successor to those very patriarchs, one can move far beyond the opinions and conditionings of his own worldview and gain the precision, clarity, depth, and breadth of enlightenment. A second instructional device of Zen is the Teisho, literally to take in hand and speak out. Unlike a sermon or lecture, the Teisho does more than exhort or inform. Its basic aim is to present the Dharma directly. Teisho is enlightenment, or Buddha nature revealed directly, a living experience of the point in question. The Teisho thrusts its meaning in the face of the listener, challenging him to grasp it and make it his own. Usually based upon a koan, the Teisho may raise many more questions than it seems to answer, and leave its audience with renewed determination to answer those questions themselves from their own living experience. All right, let's check it out. Got a preface from the original author, Mumon. Do we want to read this or keep going? Since it's the actual preface to the Gateless Gate, let's read a little bit. The gateless barrier of the Zen sect. Zen makes the words and the mind of Buddha its foundation. It makes no gate the gate of Dharma. It is no gate from the start. How can we pass through it? Haven't you ever heard the old saying? Things that come in through the gate are not family treasures. What is gained by causation is continuously going on, forming and disintegrating. Such remarks are just like raising heavy waves when there is no wind, or gouging a wound into fine skin. How much more ridiculous to adhere to words and phrases or try to understand by means of the intellect. It is exactly like trying to strike the moon with a stick or to scratch an itchy spot on the foot through the surface of the shoe. What connection is there? In the summer of the first year of Jotei, 1228, I, Ekai, was at Ryusho in Toka as head monk. At that time the monks asked me to instruct them. I finally took up the koans of the ancient masters and used them as brickbats to knock at the gate, inducing the students according to their capability and aspiration. I recorded those koans, and they have unwillingly formed a collection. From the start, I did not arrange them in any order. They amount to 48 cases in all. I call them as a whole Mumonkan, the Gateless Gate. If a man is a fellow of valor, he will rush straight into the barrier like a dagger. Even Nada, the 8-armed demon, will not be able to hold him back. Even the 4 7s of the west and the 2 3s of the east will beg for their lives on seeing his face from afar. If one hesitates, however, he is like a man who watches a horse pass outside a window. If he blinks his eyes, it is already gone. The verse. The great way, there is no gate. There are 1,000 different roads. If one passes through the barrier once, he will walk independently in the universe. Then we have the Teisho on that section. So I think we'll read this part of the Teisho that describes just the verse here. The great way, there is no gate. The great way means the essential world. The essential world is no other than our essential nature. There is no gate in our essential nature. There are 1,000 different roads. Roads refer to koans. Every koan is a road which leads everybody to the essential world, namely to great enlightenment. If one passes through the barrier once, he will walk independently in the universe. When one realizes the essential world through great enlightenment, one is for the first time a man of true freedom. He or she can walk independently through the universe, whenever and wherever. What a cool book. Okay, so we get the koan, then we get Mumon's interpretation or explication of it, and then we get Yamada's Teisho on all three. Yeah, Teisho on the case, and on the commentary, and on the verse. All right, he said they're not in any order, so let's just go to a random one and check it out. Case 24, leaving speech and silence behind. The case. A monk asked Fuketsu in all earnestness, "Both speech and silence are concerned with re and me. How can we transcend them?" Fuketsu said, "I constantly think of Konan in March, where partridges chirp among hundreds of sweet-scented blossoms." Both speech and silence are concerned with re and me. How can we transcend them? And then he comes and answers with this beautiful image that he's painting with them. And I don't know what re and me is. Anyway, Mumon's commentary. Fuketsu's activity of mind is like lightning. He gains the road and immediately walks along. But why does he rest upon the tip of the Ancient One's tongue and not cut it off? If you realize this deeply, a way will be found naturally. Just leave all words behind and say one phrase. The verse. Fuketsu does not speak in his usual style. Before he says anything, it is already manifested. If you go on chattering glibly, you should be ashamed of yourself. Oh no, some highlighting. Barely any though, hopefully. And then we have the Teisho, which describes the characters. To enter is re, to come out is me. So both speech and silence are concerned with entering and going forth, going out. So here we have an interpretation. One way of thinking about re and me would be in terms of the denominator and numerator of the fraction I often refer to. Alternatively, it can simply be that re means the subject or consciousness, and me means the object or outer world. In either case, speech is of me, the phenomenal world, and silence is of re, separated from the phenomenal world. At any rate, both speech and silence are connected with subject and object, in other words, with the dualistic world. The monk in this case knew that as long as we are confined to the world of dualistic concepts, we cannot free ourselves from the sufferings of the 6 evil realms. All right, cool. Let's keep moving. Oh, old bookmarks. I love finding these from tailors. All right, let's keep going. Okay. Maybe the last one. Cool. So this is 3 Tales by Flaubert. Translated by Arthur McDowell from the Borzoi Pocketbooks series from 1924. This one's gotta smell good. Smells sweet and musty. And I got this because of story Herodias, which I think I was reading through that Gustave Moreau book, and so many of his paintings are about Salome, and Herodias, I think, is her mother. And that led me back to Flaubert as one of my favorite authors anyway, so I decided to get this little short story collection. From the translator's preface, these 3 short stories by Flaubert are unlike anyone else's, and they are also unlike much of his own work, for another reason than their shortness. They suggest a mood not always to be detected in his books. He obviously enjoyed writing them. It is true that when they were written he was in sudden need of money, but it is more significant that he turned to them as a refreshment from the dry labors for his last book, Bouvard Ep18. Each subject gave him a pleasure which has secretly quickened the pleasure of his readers. To write A Simple Heart, he steeped himself in old memories, and figures which had once been before his eyes, his great-aunt, her servant, and the parrot, were transposed into a new life and have been made immortal. Flaubert's tale takes you deep into the old-fashioned Normandy which was part of his own fiber, and, more surprisingly, into the very mind and heart of his inarticulate Félicité. If he hated the bourgeois, he could love the people. With a beautiful tenderness, he penetrates the old servant's crust of silence, and so the story, bare and reticent as it is charged with an emotion unusual in his writing. He imagined it out of a strong feeling of his own, and with a desire to make other people share his feeling. There have been readers and critics who wondered, after finishing Madame Bovary, what Flaubert really thought about that heroine. There can be no doubt what he thinks about Félicité. He was content to describe the legend of St. Julian as a piece of tushery, but its zest and witchery have made it the special favorite of many, as for instance Renan. Here again it was a bit of his Normandy, a painted window at Rouen or Caudebec, which gave the motive, and there is a half-exultant ring in the last sentence where he owns to it. Herodias seems much more impersonal, but it is just one of those antique or Eastern scenes which lured his imagination most, and with a striking and manageable theme he achieved the success which he missed in Salammbô. Which I'm almost insulted. I wonder what he's talking about there, because that's one of my favorite books and maybe one of the greatest novels ever written. Though he began the book with a sense of holiday, he took his usual pains. He worked 16 hours one day and the whole of the next, and at the end of it he has mapped out the first page of A Simple Heart. It was only the first draft, and the contrast between his scored and raveled drafts and the close, exquisite handwriting of his final versions is an image of his labor. The result in these stories is also close and fine. Whether he is using an almost Defoe-like realism, as in the first tale, or the tapestry effects of the second, or the sharp, clear color of the third, he gets an astonishing blend of economy and meaning. Under all his deceptive simplicity, there is not one unweighed word. His vision unrolls two whole lives in A Simple Heart and St. Julian, and makes the figures in Herodias living persons, though seen with a complete detachment. Anyone who presumes to translate these stories becomes aware of the risks very soon. Flaubert's rhythm, varying here from extreme staccato to the subtlest modulations, is one problem. His intense compression, which is of the kind that an English writer seldom tries to rival, is another. It might be possible to deal with him frankly by paraphrase rather than translation, in the hope of arriving at an English Flaubert. But this would not be Gustave Flaubert, and a great deal would have to be sacrificed. I preferred to keep fairly close to his letter, at the risk of not being English in another sense, hoping that what the rendering may have missed of his spirit will be supplied by the illustrations which Monsieur Diaz de Soria, a fellow countryman of his, has designed so well. Arthur McDowell. All right, I'm going to check out the beginning of Herodias. All right, the first page of Salammbô is my favorite beginning to any book ever, so I have high hopes for this one. As a little background, Herodias is the mother of Salome, and according to tradition, they both had a hand in convincing Herod Antipas to execute John the Baptist. Herodias, Chapter 1. The citadel of Machaerus rose east of the Dead Sea on a basalt peak shaped like a cone, girdled by 4 deep valleys, 2 about its sides, 1 in front, and the 4th behind. There were houses piled against its base inside a circling wall which rose and fell with the uneven ground, and a zigzag road gashed in the rock linked the town to the fortress, whose ramparts were 120 cubits high with many angles, battlements along the edge, and here and there towers, like diadems in the stone crown hung over the abyss. Inside there was a palace ornamented with porticos. It was roofed with a terrace which had a balustrade of sycamore wood running round it, and poles arranged for stretching an awning. Before daybreak one morning, the tetrarch Herod Antipas came out to lean on it and look round him. The mountains immediately under his eyes were beginning to unveil their crests, while their main bulk was still in shadow to the bottom of the chasms. A mist was floating. It parted, and the contours of the Dead Sea appeared. The dawn, rising behind Machaerus, spread a glow of red. Soon it lit up the sands on the beach, the hills, the desert, and, still further, the mountains of Judea, and steepened their gray, knotted surfaces. En-Gedi drew its dark line across the middle, and Hebron rounded like a dome in the recess. Eshcol showed pomegranates, Sorek vines, and Carmel fields of sesame, and above Jerusalem rose the huge cube-like form of the town of Antony. The Tetrarch looked away from it to contemplate the palm trees of Jericho on the right. He thought of the other towns in his Galilee, Capernaum, Endor, Nazareth, and Tiberias, to which, perhaps, he would never return. And the Jordan flowed over the arid plain, absolutely white and glistening like a snowdrift. The lake was now a sheet of lapis lazuli, and at its southern point, towards Yemen, Antipas recognized something he was afraid to see. There were brown tents sprinkled about, horses and men with lances passing between them, and dying fires glittered like sparks on the ground. They were the troops of the king of the Arabs, whose daughter he had put away to take Herodias, the wife of one of his brothers who lived in Italy and made no claims to power. Antipas was waiting for help from the Romans, gnawed with anxieties because Vitellius, the governor of Syria, was slow to appear. Probably Agrippa had ruined his credit with the emperor. His third brother Philip, the ruler of Batanea, was arming secretly. The Jews were tired of his idolatrous ways, and everyone else was tired of his power, so much so that he was wavering between two schemes, either to conciliate the Arabs or make an alliance with the Parthians. On the pretext of celebrating his birthday, he had invited the commanders of his troops, the stewards of his domains, and the chief men in Galilee to a great feast that very day. He swept all the roads with a searching glance. They were empty. Eagles flew over his head, and the soldiers along the rampart were asleep against the walls. Nothing stirred inside the castle. Suddenly a far-off voice, issuing seemingly out of the depths of the earth, made him turn pale. He bent down to listen. It had ceased. It rose once more. He clapped his hands and called, "Manet! Manet!" A man appeared, naked to the waist like the messieurs at baths. He was extremely tall, old, and lean, and wore a sword in a bronze sheath at his thigh. His hair was caught up with a comb, which made his forehead seem longer than it was. Sleepiness dulled the eyes, but his teeth glistened and his toes balanced lightly on the pavement. His whole body had the suppleness of a monkey, and his face was as impassive as a mummy's. "Where is he?" asked the Tetrarch. Manet pointed with his thumb to an object behind them and replied, "Still there." "I thought I heard him." And Antipas drew a deep breath of relief and inquired about Yochanan, the same whom the Latins call St. John the Baptist. He asked if anything more had been seen of the two men who were admitted to his cell as a favor a month or so before. Had their object in coming been discovered? Manet answered, "They had some mysterious words with him, like thieves when they meet at a crossroads in the evening. Then they went away towards Upper Galilee, declaring that they would bring great tidings." Antipas bent his head and then cried with an air of terror, "Guard him, and let no one enter. Close the door fast, cover up the fosse. They must not even suspect he is alive." Manet had forestalled these orders on his own account, for Yochanan was a Jew, and he hated the Jews, like all Samaritans. Their temple at Gerizim, which Moses had marked out for the center of Israel, had vanished since the reign of Hyrcanus, and the temple at Jerusalem roused them to fury as an outrage and a standing injustice. Manet had stolen into it to pollute the altar with dead men's bones. His companions were not so quick as he was, and had been beheaded. He saw it there, in the gap between two hills. The white marble walls and sheets of gold on its roof shone brilliantly in the sun. It was like a translucent hill, a superhuman object that annihilated everything by its pride and splendor. Then he reached out his arms in the direction of Zion. With body erect, head thrown back, and fists clenched, he hurled a curse at it, believing that there was an efficacy in the words. Antipas listened without appearing shocked. The Samaritan spoke again. "He is restless at times, and would like to escape, hoping for deliverance. Other times he looks subdued, like a sick animal, or else I see him walking in the dark place, repeating, 'What matters it? I must decrease that he may increase.'" Antipas and Manet looked at each other, but the Tetrarch was weary of reflection. The mountains all around, like great waves petrified in layers, the dark chasms on the sides of the cliffs, the immense blue sky, the violent blaze of light, and the depth of the abysses troubled him. He was seized with depression at the look of the desert and the suggestion of fallen amphitheaters and palaces in its crumbled surface. The hot wind brought a smell of sulfur like an exhalation from the accursed cities, buried under the banks of heavy waters. These signs of an eternal anger terrorized his thoughts, and he stayed there leaning his elbows on the balustrade, with his eyes fixed and his forehead in his hands. Someone touched him. He turned round. Herodias stood in front of him. I know translations can only get so close to the original, but wow, what a master. And what can be said about Flaubert that hasn't been said a million times already? But just the density, no frills, everything's necessary, just perfect. I'm tempted to read this whole thing in a separate sort of audiobook series on this channel, which we've been thinking about. It seems like a good length for it. But yeah, I'm definitely excited to finish that, and that's going to be enough for Flaubert. All right, guys, just a little wrap up. But first I wanted to say thanks for checking out this channel, and it's been really fun to make these videos, and it's made my book addiction, it's like a fun way to sort of leverage my book buying addiction into something else that's like creative and interesting to me. And I really enjoy making these videos, and I appreciate every single person that's given a few minutes of their time to check them out. And I hope that in looking at these random books that I buy, maybe some new topic or new avenue of interest is open for you. So this episode, the first book we had was Militia Christi by Adolf Harnack. And this is just a cool hardback from pretty recently, but the original book was from 1905, and it's The Christian Religion and the Military in the First 3 Centuries. This copy's from 1981. And the second book we had was The Gateless Gate, a paperback from 1979, newly translated with commentary by Zen Master Koun Yamada. It seems like a really cool version of this text, and it provides a lot of commentary to the koans, which are, of course, opaque by their very nature. So it seems like a helpful addition. And these were each $10. And then the one that I like the most, of course, one of my favorite authors, Flaubert, Three Tales. This book's almost 100 years old. And this one we got for $16. And I love this. Love this one. And I'm very excited to read Herodias in particular. And maybe we'll read the whole thing on an audiobook version if we feel like it. It seems like it would be a good length for that. So anyway, Merry Christmas. I hope everyone had a good Christmas, a great Christmas, and appreciate you checking out the show. And until next time, happy reading.